it's all just lies.
Can thousands of people be wrong?
In 2002, a man stood at the edge of a cliff with two strangers in trench coats. They told him to stop looking where he didn't belong, or he just might end up dead. Here's my husband, Damon, with the details.
Have you ever had the feeling that you're being watched? Reports of mysterious, strange individuals have come in for more than 3/4 of a century. It's been said that certain people run into them more often than others. And although odd, most of the time these strange individuals just blend into the background and then they fade from memory almost as soon as they're out of sight. If you're into the paranormal, well, then there's a higher than average chance that you've encountered them yourself, but you just don't remember it. Some people truly believe that these strange individuals actually do exist, and they're keeping tabs on those who have had bizarre experiences or are maybe just a little bit more sensitive to the supernatural than others. They also believe that these mysterious individuals are watching us constantly, monitoring us, making sure that we never learn too much. Sometimes when someone sees just a little too far behind the curtain, these strange beings make contact. And when they do, it's almost always hair-raisingly eerie. Witnesses have reported that during these visits, these individuals take notes, they ask questions, and they try to figure out just exactly what it is that that person knows. And if they believe that he or she knows too much, well, then sometimes they warn him or her to let it go. You may have heard of these individuals before. They were the original Men in Black, and they're nothing like the Hollywood movies with Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones. Up close, they seem as if they're not quite human. Their faces often seem fake, almost as if they're wearing some sort of a human mask instead of having a face themselves. Their fingers are unusually pale and bony. They move their bodies in odd, disjointed ways, almost as if they're not used to being in a body. Oftentimes, their clothing and skin look a little too perfect to be real, like something one might find in a store window or a museum. Amy found countless reports of people meeting these strange individuals, but one of the more detailed and earlier ones comes to us from the author and researcher John Keel. In February of 1967, he interviewed the Christiansen family, who had experienced an otherworldly phenomenon and then was visited by one of these strange individuals, who they said actually had a wire coming out of his or its leg.
Welcome to Vel Arcana. Here, we share mysteries that often leave us asking, did it really happen? I research the cases, my husband tells the stories, and at the end, we both share what we personally believe.
Around 8 p.m. on Tuesday, November 22nd, 1966, the Christiansen family saw this strange light in the sky while they were driving down the freeway. All 7 people in the car witnessed this bright light plummet at a very high rate of speed and then disappear behind a hill directly in front of the car. At first, they thought that maybe this was an airplane and it had crashed, but there was no explosion. And once their car came up over the ridge, they saw that this light had actually stopped just short of the tree line and was hovering there in the air. Edward Christiansen pulled the car over and everyone got out to get a better look. And just then, as if this thing had somehow sensed that they were all staring at it, it deliberately began moving toward them, perfectly silent, and it kept coming until it hovered directly above their heads, and then it quickly shot off into the distance. But, and now here's the strange part, all of the witnesses said that they had had this strong emotionally negative reaction, as if they had each in some way just, been exposed to pure evil. Arlene Christiansen, Edward's wife, and her sister Gwendolyn immediately broke into hysterics right there on the side of the road, and the children all began to cry. The family said later that the energy surrounding them at that moment was overbearing and horrific. Mr. Christiansen, who himself was greatly affected, did his best to keep a grip on his own emotions and to calm his family down. Eventually, he was able to get everyone back into the car, and they continued their drive. Although this experience was odd, it's really what happened next that brings their story onto our channel. Shortly after the Christiansen family had had that strange encounter with a floating evil orb of light, I guess, they moved into a new house. And they hadn't lived in their new house long enough for their address to be listed in any directories, or for anyone outside of friends and family to even know that the Christiansens were even there. Now, please keep that in mind as I share this next part. Around 5 p.m. on Monday, January 9th, 1967, a loud knock came at the front door. Arlene Christiansen, the lady of the house, was in the kitchen preparing dinner, so she asked her 17-year-old daughter, Connie, to go see who it was. Connie took a peek through the curtains, and she told her mother that a very strange-looking man was standing on the front porch. So Arlene stopped what she was doing, and she went to the door. When she opened it, she was taken back. There was indeed a very strange-looking man standing on the porch. She described him as unusually tall, standing maybe 7 feet. She said that he was by far the whitest man that she had ever seen, with shoulders so broad that he could have been 2 men standing side by side. He was dressed oddly as well, not nearly warm enough for the time of year. He was wearing a fur hat that covered the sides of his face, but his black trench coat was exceptionally thin, and she said that it looked fake, like maybe he had just purchased it at a Halloween costume shop right before he had arrived. Strange, right? Well, the man asked if this was the Christiansen residence, and the hairs on the back of Arlene's neck went up, because as I said, they hadn't lived there long enough to be listed in any directories yet. How in the world could this man know that this in fact was the Christiansen's residence? Well, Arlene said that yes, it was. And then the man asked if Mr. Edward Christiansen was home. And she said yes, that he was. And then the man told her that he was from the Missing Heirs Bureau and that Mr. Christiansen just might have inherited a very large sum of money. Well, she called for her husband and then let the man inside. Edward, her husband, stood 6'2", and he weighed well over 300 pounds. But when he walked into the room, he looked small next to this stranger. The man started the conversation with the most peculiar sentence. He said, "This will only take 42 minutes." That's an extremely precise number, right? He didn't say 40, he didn't say 45, he said 42. Well, Edward and Arlene exchanged odd glances, and then the man removed his hat. When he did, it was obvious why he had chosen one that covered most of his face. His head was overly large, and his face was extremely narrow and pointed. Looked bizarre. They said that his eyes were placed way too far apart, and they were bulging a bit, kind of like as if he had thyroid eyes, I guess. They said that one of his eyes didn't work quite right, lagging just a bit, making them think that maybe he was somehow artificial. I know that sounds strange. All of this made him very difficult for them to look at while he was talking. Edward told the man that there had to be a mistake, that he just could not believe that anyone had left him any money. But the man said that he just might be the Edward Christiansen that they were looking for, but in order to find out, he would need to ask them a few questions. Well, the couple agreed, and the man pulled out a small notebook and pen. Now, up to this point, this man was just odd, and the Christiansen family might never have come forward sharing this experience with the world if they hadn't seen a strange green wire coming out of one of the man's socks. The man was wearing black pants and black socks, but the pants were just a little too short, so when he took his seat, the pants rose up to his calves, not only revealing that he was wearing those black socks, but also showing part of his bare legs. And then they saw, and this is crazy, this thick green wire coming up out of one of his socks and then disappearing under one of his pant legs. Well, that was strange in itself. But then, at one point, now check this out. When the man shifted in his seat, Arlene could clearly see that this wire was actually going into the flesh of his leg. Well, at first she thought that maybe her eyes were playing tricks on her, but then she caught the expression from her husband. He glanced over at her, then down at the man's socks, indicating that he too had noticed it, and then they both felt the hairs on the back of their necks go up. They later said that the man's speech was dull and emotionless. They said that he used short phrases and he clipped his words. And oddly, even though he had told the family his name when he walked in the front door, later, when they all came forward with this information, no one in the house could remember what it was. At first, the family dog did not like this man at all, and it snarled at him aggressively. But then, and this is so weird, almost robotically, he turned and focused on the dog. He mumbled a couple of words underneath his breath, and the dog immediately calmed down. The questions that he asked seemed as if they were designed to dissect every part of Edward's life. During the interview, the man's face gradually grew redder and redder for some reason until it was an abnormal shade of red. At that point, he asked for a glass of water and then pulled out this overly large yellow pill. And a few seconds after he took this pill, his face turned back to its normal color. Finally, he concluded the interview, and then he stood up. He thanked the family, and then, now, get this, he walked out the door in exactly 42 minutes. The Christiansen family had a one-time experience. They witnessed a strange phenomenon and then was visited by an odd figure in a black suit. But Paul Sinclair claims that he has had encounters with these strange individuals all of his life. He says that it began when his father pointed out a bright light in the sky when he was very young. Paul was dead asleep, and his father rushed into his bedroom, woke him up, and then pointed out the window.
Look at that, Paul. You see it over there, by the power station? The round ball of light?
Paul wiped the sleep from his eyes, and then he saw this strange floating orb hovering near the power station. After that, and various times during his life, for the rest of his life, he says that he has seen strange beings that most of us don't believe exist and never see. It began one night when he woke up alone and frightened. He said that he looked toward the window. At first, nothing looked out of the ordinary, but then he saw shiny reflections that looked a lot like eyes.
I definitely remember seeing the eyes first, but after a while it began to change, and I could also see a head and a long thin body with arms that looked too long. At the time it made no sense. Nothing much has changed in that respect today. Nevertheless, I know what I saw. They were like chameleons in that way, and they blended into the pale blue curtains.
Paul said that he never saw them move, but at different times, one or more of them would be gone from the window and then suddenly be standing right next to his bed, leaning over him, staring at him.
I never saw them move across the room. They were just there. People remember special occasions, anchor points in life, first love, first child. This was the first time I felt fear.
At first, Paul thought that he was the only person on Earth who even knew that they existed, whoever they were. And he might have grown up thinking that the night people were just creations of a child's overactive imagination. But then one day he found out that his parents could see them too. Just after midnight on Friday, January 1st, 1971, Paul, who was now 8 years old, was walking home from a New Year's Eve party celebration with his parents. Everyone was upbeat, still in high spirits from the night's festivals. Paul said that he remembered him and his family singing songs and him and his dad running and sliding on the ice. He said that the night was clear and the air was crisp. And just as they were nearing the house on an empty stretch of road, he spotted a guinea pig and 2 rabbits just a little ways out into the field. It was odd, because although he knew that they were definitely live animals, they were standing perfectly still, as if they were standing on display or something. And then he heard his mother's voice, but it was strange because it was filled with fear.
Oh my God, what are they? Can you see them, Bob? Over there, look, 2 of them.
At first, Paul was confused because there were 3 animals, not 2. And then Paul's father indicated that he also could see them, whatever they were. He told Paul's mother to just keep on walking and not to look at them. Paul said that it was right then that he saw what his parents had been looking at. Just beyond the animals, further out into the field, were the silhouettes of 2 strange-looking beings. Paul recognized them instantly. They were the night people.
I want to call them people, but they're not people. I'm not even sure if they were aliens or demons. Perhaps aliens are demons. I realise this strange recollection from childhood doesn't fit into anything inside or outside of normal. But that is what I saw. 2 tall beings stood in a field of ice and snow. They looked dark-coloured, but in truth I'm sure they were grey. And if we had been closer, we would have even seen their textured skin. Somehow they were able to project fear. I know this because as soon as I saw them, I felt overwhelmed with the same type of fear that Mum and Dad must have been experiencing. I saw nothing to suggest that they were male or female, and even though I couldn't see their eyes, I knew their eyes were fixed on us. Their sharp outlines were set against the frozen land, making them clear enough to be certain that they weren't just a trick of the light. Even though they had 2 arms and 2 legs, everything about them was wrong. Their arms were slightly splayed out at the sides and came down past the knees, and their torsos were long and narrow. It's hard to comprehend how beings with limbs so slender could support themselves. They were just there. I don't have a clue how they got there.
Although the incident was bizarre, and it was clear that his parents had seen them, neither Paul's mother nor his father ever discussed them. Paul speculates that the appearance of those strange animals just might have been an attempt to keep his family's eyes off the 2 beings further out into the field. Paul would have many more experiences, seeing things that most people never do. And one day, he would start to study them, kind of look into what's going on, trying to figure out exactly what they were. And that was when he was visited by those strange beings that most people refer to as the Men in Black. Paul Sinclair grew up, and for the rest of his life, for some reason, he was able to see things that most people don't. And after a while, he got curious. Why was it that he could see these things? And what exactly were they? What were the night people? And what were those strange lights in the sky? His curiosity grew stronger every day, but speculation was as far as Paul would ever take things. He never really dove in and tried to get to the bottom of the mystery. That is, until August of 2002. It was then that he saw another one of those lights in the sky and decided that he would run an ad in the newspaper, asking if anyone else had seen the object in the sky that day. And that is when everything changed for Paul Sinclair. Shortly after he ran that ad, 2 very odd people showed up at his house. Paul was outside at his car when they startled him. He never saw them walk up. He never heard a sound. He just turned around and they were there. He would later call them Mr. and Mrs. Tick. That's because every once in a while, now this is really bizarre, they would look at each other, and instead of speaking in any normal language, they would seemingly communicate in a series of clicks and ticks. Paul said that they were both dressed in long gray coats that were fastened all the way down, but he didn't see any buttons. He also said that it was hot out, and the long coats didn't really make any sense. He said that they looked, and this is interesting, like they had just stepped out of a 1940s movie. Well, he asked them why they were there, and then one of them said that they understood that Paul was into UFOs, and they wanted to speak to him about that. At first, he thought that they were there because of the ad that he had ran in the newspaper, but then he remembered that he hadn't given his home address. In any case, Paul told them that he was busy at the moment, but he agreed that he would meet them at an old cafe that overlooked the sea later on that day at 7 p.m. Paul later said that he didn't really know why he had agreed to meet this couple. He said that in retrospect, it really seemed a bit reckless. He didn't know them at all, and they were extremely odd. He also said that he had this strange feeling that part of the conversation was somehow, and I know this sounds weird, but it was somehow missing. He went over it several times in his mind, but it were as if it had somehow been erased. Well, Paul got to the diner about 6:45, and the couple was already there, standing by a bench and staring out at the sea. Well, Paul left his car and waved, but the couple did not wave back. And as Paul approached, he noticed their shoes. They were perfectly white and perfectly clean, making them look fake, as if they had just been purchased a few moments before they arrived. The couple's expressions were odd too. They never changed, and they didn't show any welcoming signs at all. They didn't smile, and they didn't say hello. As soon as Paul was close enough for them to have a conversation, one of them mentioned some cryptic message about having enough time to eat. All confused, Paul looked around, and when he did, he noticed the cafe was closed, and that the three of them were the only ones there, and this was a secluded area not far from a deadly cliff. He said that it was at that moment that the gravity of the situation hit him. He looked back at the couple and he asked them why they contacted him. Instead of answering, they looked at each other, and then they spoke in a series of those strange ticks and clicks. So he asked them again, what did they want? Was it related to the newspaper ad that he had placed? And still, they did not answer him. Instead, they just spoke in riddles. Finally, Paul said that enough was enough, and just as he was about to turn and leave, one of them said something that completely unnerved him.
You have seen them since you were 4 years old, and we have always known you could remember.
At that, Paul's legs went weak.
Could these people have been the night people? They didn't want to talk to me about the recent UFO sighting. In fact, they didn't want to talk to me about anything. They just wanted to make me aware that they knew things from the darkest parts of my childhood. That realization was such a scary moment. How could they have known such things without being there? I've asked myself countless times in the past 50 years for more recall, for more than just the partial memories that I retained, and I've failed each time. Could these two strangers standing in front of me have had the answers? Perhaps they did. All I wanted to do at that moment was to get away from them.
Paul was just about to turn and leave when one of them said something that could only have been taken as a direct threat.
Some people have the ability to carry memories way too long, and you are one of those people. You should be careful of what you're hoping for, because some people have seen the answers that you're seeking, and those people are now gone forever.
I took what they said about people being gone forever as a warning, but I didn't and still don't understand what happened to attract their attention. All I can think is that no one is ever supposed to get close to finding out anything. I don't think I've ever got that close. Maybe the difference is that I have never stopped asking or looking for the answers.
Amy will be on in just a moment with her verdict, but in the meantime, here's what I think. Although cases like these have been reported for decades from people from all over the world, no one has ever produced even a shred of physical evidence. But then again, I think, can thousands of people be wrong? Or lying? I think that if there is a repeated pattern of specific otherworldly phenomenon, well, then the odds are that there probably are some Men in Black types. But are they these odd ones from another world? I'm sorry, but I just don't see it. I don't think that otherworldly beings of that stature or that ability would have a need to contact people that way. Maybe people are being visited by Men in Black types, but they misread or are tricked, which is what I think probably happens, into believing that something far stranger is taking place. So my verdict is no. These visits are not what most people think that they are. I think that the more likely answer is that witnesses are being steered, misdirected, or perhaps quietly reminded that closed doors should not be looked into too closely. Something like Project Mirage, where the government actually intentionally tricked thousands of people into believing that they had been abducted by aliens. And that, at least for me, is the more unsettling possibility, because if the Men in Black are real, and if they aren't aliens, well, then someone much closer to home has been betraying his or her own kind for a very long time. But on a completely different note, some of you may know that our precious baby girl broke her leg, our mascot, our family member. Well, the medical costs were just over $5,000. And several of you, this is, you're going to see me cry now, have pitched in to our GoFundMe account to help with the costs. And I want to say that I am eternally grateful. That little girl means so much to me. Thank you.
Many think that the Men in Black originated with the Al Bender case in 1953, but they actually predate Bender's encounter by more than 5 years. Authors of The Coming of the Saucers reported that on June 21, 1947, Harbor Patrolman Harold Dahl saw 6 strange donut-shaped aircraft in the sky near Maury Island. Suddenly, one of the craft began raining metal debris, and Harold, well, he collected some of it. The very next day, an extremely strange man dressed in a black suit showed up at Harold's home. The men ended up in a restaurant, and that's where things got spooky. The minute that they sat down, the stranger recounted everything that had happened the day before, in eerie detail. Harold, he was speechless. Then, the stranger threatened him, saying that if Harold loved his family, then he would never discuss this topic with anyone ever again. Which means 6 years before the term was ever coined, Harold Dahl's summer of 1947 encounter is more likely the origin of the Men in Black mystery. So, with these stories going back nearly 80 years, and so many people reporting similar encounters, I can't say that it's all just lies or misunderstandings. Sorry, but not sorry. My verdict is yes. I believe there is some truth to these strange Men in Black stories. So, with Damon's verdict of no and my verdict of yes, that makes the Velarcana verdict unsure. I truly am curious to know what your verdict is. Decide with me, Damon, or somewhere in between. Please let us know and why. Now, on another note, I have an update on our precious little mascot, Arcana. Her surgery revealed 2 fractures on the same leg. We were able to scrounge up enough money that ultimately we need to pay back right away for her surgery. And thank God for your donations. Between the emergency visits, surgery, medications, follow-up, her vet bills are now over $5,000. So we did something we don't normally do. We started a GoFundMe for her. If you love animals like we do, and you're able to help even just a little, we would be incredibly grateful. And if you can't donate...
Let's stop. Let's try it again.
I got it.
Okay.
And if you can't donate, then please share the GoFundMe. That helps too. All we want is to get that 4-legged little dog turd healthy and back to doing what she loves most, being your mascot, and of course, being the keeper of ancient secrets. Thank you for caring about our little girl. And until next time, stay curious.